All right, hello everyone. Good afternoon, Yate. Thank you for joining us for this webinar titled Supporting Native Youth Wellness Through HIV Prevention Strategies. As is appropriate for Navajo people to introduce themselves and share our relationships with other Navajos and Native people, I will introduce myself in my Navajo language. She'e Hanabablu Yinashe, Kaishtinishli do Bilagana Bashishchin, do Tatnizani, do Shadali, do Bilagana Dashache. My name is Hannah Blue, and I am Dene, or Navajo, from New Mexico. My clan is the Red Bottom Clan, born for Bilagana or Anglo. My maternal grandparents' clan is the Tangle People clan, and my paternal grandparents are also Bilagana. This is how I am Navajo. I am a capacity building assistant specialist for What Works in Youth HIV, which is bringing you this webinar today. Before we get started with the content, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please disconnect from the webinar. Please note that all attendees are in listen-only mode. Please use your chat box in the right part of your screen, or email whatworksinyouthhiv.org for assistance. But if you have any questions for our presenters today, please chat your questions throughout the presentation, and we will answer all the questions at the end. Also, please be sure to select all panelists for the recipient in your chat box so we can be sure to see your question. You may also email us after the webinar with any questions that you have. The audio for this webinar is available via your computer speakers or headset and the phone. Please choose one method for your listening pleasure. If you are using your computer speakers and can't hear the audio, please make sure your computer audio is turned on and turned up. If you're still having problems, please use your phone and dial into the following call-in number: 1-866-469-3239, and please use the passcode 625-420-529. The web interface is as displayed. So on your right-hand side, you have your chat box. Again, please chat out to all panelists. And also on the top of your screen, top right of your screen, you will see the options to adjust your zoom and zoom in on the content. So I wanted to provide you a little bit of information about the What Works in Youth HIV Resource Center. We are operated by JSI, or John Snow Inc., and we are a public health management consulting and research organization dedicated to improving the health of individuals and communities around the world. The Adolescent HIV/AIDS Prevention National Resource Center operates through a cooperative agreement awarded by the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Adolescent Health, under this grant, with funding from the HHS Secretary's Minority AIDS Initiative Fund. Just a note, the content and conclusions on this website are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the Office on Adolescent Health, the Health and Human Services, or the U.S. government. The goal of the Resource Center is to advance best practices to improve the health and well-being of Americans' adolescents by providing innovative and practical content that makes youth-serving providers and peer leaders feel empowered to meet the needs of youth at highest risk for HIV and AIDS. Our purpose is to support and promote interventions and strategies to better integrate HIV prevention services focused on adolescents within racial and ethnic minority populations, also to promote evidence-based and evidence-informed programs and promising practices, as well as to link training and technical assistance opportunities with particular support for social marketing, social media, and education campaigns. We are bringing you this webinar today in commemoration of National Native HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, or NNHAAD, which is coming up on Monday, March 20th. Our goals today are to describe the current state of HIV and AIDS amongst American Indian Alaska Native youth, define social and cultural factors that affect Native youth's transition of HIV, and identify current trends and innovative models for Native youth HIV prevention. Here is a list of our speakers for today, and I will now introduce our first speaker, Dr. Pamela Jumper-Thurman. Dr. Jumper-Thurman is an affiliate faculty in the Department of Ethnic Studies at Colorado State University. She is a member of the Cherokee Nation and has been working with NNHAAD since efforts began in 2005. She is a clinical psychologist by profession and has been working in building community capacity for HIV prevention and intervention for many years. She is committed to an AIDS-free generation for Native people and believes strongly in the year's theme for NNHAAD, Community and Unity, Stand Strong for HIV Prevention. Now I will turn it over to Dr. Pamela Jumper-Thurman for her presentation.
And I wanted to introduce you to Unity in Community, Stand Strong for HIV Prevention. This is the theme for 2017 National Native HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. The National Native HIV/AIDS Awareness Day came about in about 2006. We started work on it, and we sent a survey out throughout the United States to a lot of different tribes and tribal members and asked people what day did they feel best exemplified the day that we would honor Native Awareness Day. And we got quite a few replies, and the most replies came for the spring equinox, because there are so many tribes that have ceremonies that are related to that day. And so that is when the first National Native HIV/AIDS Awareness Day was launched in 2007. We always encourage people to plan events around that day. Sometimes people have those events before the day and some have them after, but there are a lot of events that occur across the United States. We know that we have challenges, and this is one of the reasons that this day came about. We know that we're at greater risk for HIV infection because of some of the cofactors that are presented to us as people. There's a whole list of cofactors, and I'll go over some of those, but basically they include sexually transmitted infections, poverty, alcohol abuse, IV drug use, social risk cofactors, just a variety of things that really have an impact on our illnesses, our diseases, and how we seek treatment. From 2009 through 2014, the only groups that showed increases in rates of HIV infection were American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Asians. And we do know that we have the lowest proportion of people who survive more than 12, 24, or 36 months after an HIV diagnosis. There's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them that we speculate about is that we tend to not necessarily trust all of the health facilities that we have, so we don't go in for treatment checkups. We don't always ask for testing, and so since we aren't tested as much, we don't know that we have an illness until it's further advanced. Some of the data challenges that we have, we represent less than 1% of reported AIDS cases, and we represent less than 1% of the United States population. But we do know that the data on American Indians and Alaska Native, it's not accurate. We are disproportionately affected by STIs. For example, gonorrhea and syphilis are anywhere from 2 to 6 times higher than the comparable rate for white non-Hispanics. We have much higher alcohol rates, drug use rates, and our teen pregnancy rates are high. So we know that because these things are high and those reflect sexual activity, we know that our HIV risk is higher as well and much higher than reported. So what's the impact of this kind of inaccurate data for our Native people? First of all, continued health disparity. We know that this kind of disparity will continue if we don't do something about it. There's an increase in new infections. We lose funding because of not having accurate data. We also have a lack of education this time about PrEP. There's very little that's been out there for Native people. There's decreased access to care. We know that some of the health outcomes are not positive. And there's an increase in HIV-related health disparities. We also tend to have leaders that don't believe that there's a concern because our data isn't accurate, and it reflects that we have lower rates, which is not necessarily true. And, of course, all of this leads to a lack of funding. But we are resilient people. We know that. We have survived many, many things that have come our way, and we know that there is unity in community. So we hope that you will hold an event in your community to either test, educate, offer treatment. We want you to know your status. We hope that you'll get on board and post your event on our website. Please visit our website. We have all kinds of posters that you can download, fact sheets that you can download. We have save the date cards that you can download, and that website is www.NNHAAD.org. So we hope that you'll visit that and perhaps pull down the PSA and listen to the PSA or share our new PSA this year. We also hope that you'll post your event on our NNHAAD Facebook page. We keep that active and up, and we try to track as many of the events that go on as we possibly can. These are just photos of some of the events that have taken place in the past. There have been well over 600 events that were held over the first 3 years of, just the first 3 years of the National Native HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. Sometimes people do walks for awareness. There may be a ceremony that would be held. Some people have sunrise ceremonies. We hope that people will wear red ribbons and create some kind of a youth education or awareness event. Some have held assemblies with guest speakers. Some have marketed the NNHAAD materials, the poster, the save the date cards, and some have posted on social marketing networks. So we hope that those kinds of things will happen. During the first NNHAAD event in 2007, we had 3 organizations involved in launching that event, and that was the NAPSI, which I'm sure some of you have heard of NAPSI before, the National Native American AIDS Prevention Center. It was CASE, the Commitment to Action for 7th Generation Awareness and Education, and also Intertribal Council of Arizona. And we were the first group that launched the first National Native HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. It's exciting now to see that our committee now includes all of these different groups. And so we feel like we have a lot of support. We may not have as much funding anymore, but we do have a lot of support. These are just some additional resources that you can go to. First of all, there is our website again. We always like to list the cdc.gov website. SAMHSA has also supported National Native HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, and you can always find a testing place. AIDS.gov has been a big supporter for us, and we really appreciate that group. So be mindful and keep the conversation going. We hope that you will have an event for National Native HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, Spring Equinox, March the 20th. I'll now pass this to Stephanie Craig-Rushing.
Thank you, Dr. Thurman. As Stephanie is getting ready for her presentation, we just want to send out a reminder to all participants to please chat your questions for each presenter throughout the webinar, and please be sure to select all panelists for the recipient, and we will then answer questions at the end. The next speaker that we have, is actually Kioshia Peter. In way of introduction, Kioshia Peter is of the Folded Arms People Clan and born for the Mexican People Clan. She is from Kirtland, New Mexico, and is currently pursuing a Master's in American Studies at the University of New Mexico. Her family's knowledge, curiosity, and concern for her family and respected Native Nation have shaped her into an individual who is willing to apply her skills and knowledge to the betterment of her community. Kioshia strives to continue the resistance and decolonial work in sexual and reproductive justice in the Native Nation and surrounding areas through the Res Condom Tour and nonprofit partnership with the Native Youth Sexual Health Network and Young Women United. I will now turn it over to Kioshia for her presentation.
Hi, can everybody hear me? I've never really done like a webinar before, so it's kind of interesting to see it happen. Yat amatso she Kioshia Peter yansha, but I mean actually nakaidana bashichin, taslahanta pahanta she tachini lasanale, dagaskai nasha. Hello everybody. I'm just here because Hannibal is a great supporter of the work that we do with the Res Condom Tour, and she had asked me to present today on the work that we do and the work that we're passionate about within our communities. And let me just grab something over here. And just to begin our conversation, so the Res Condom Tour is actually a collaboration effort between three main organizers back on our homelands of the Nebuchadnezzar on Navajo Nation. And we began back in 2013, and we've been going strong for the past 4 years. And over here, just to give you a background on some of the organizers before I get into the meat of our initiative. The first organizer, his name is Matthew Skeets, and he's Dene. He is a recent UNM graduate, also pursuing a MA in creative writing at IIA. We're hoping that he gets it sometime soon, like within the next year or so he can be a badass poet. And he actually organized the first Res Condom Tour. And this is him over here. And the Res Condom Tour is actually his brainchild. So everything that we have built since then has been because Matthew Skeets was actually the one who spearheaded the first event and helped bring us together to continue to do this work in our communities. And our other Res Condom Tour organizer is one of the ones who actually lives on our reservation, and her name is Faith Baldwin. She's Dene. She's working with Dene College as the HIV, HCV, and SA programmer, and she was alumni from ASU. She's also a sex educator, a counselor, and a teacher. She is actually not a youth, and she got involved with us through her program, Tested I Am, I Know. And the picture that we have of her right here, she's holding a guitar, and this is at a community music event over in Winter Rock that happened last year. And just to give you some more background on myself, I'm also Dene. I graduated from UNM back in 2015, and I'm currently the Native Youth Coordinator over at the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. I'm also a fellow at the Native Youth Leadership Alliance. And so what the Res Condom Tour is, it's actually a program, an initiative, a grassroots organization, if you will, that was developed by Indigenous youth, by Matthew Skeets and myself. And so when we first started this outreach, we were starting to realize and understand the rates of HIV and the levels of HIV/AIDS and gonorrhea and chlamydia back home on our native nation, which was very disproportionately elevated because of, I guess, because of our location and whatnot. And we wanted to do something to help our native nation. And so as college students, as graduates of our universities, and as experienced people, community members, just really concerned about what we're doing for people, we wanted to give back in this way of going back home and passing out harm reduction material that could benefit everyone. And so as organizers, we're invested in removing the stigma around conversations about sex and sexuality on our reservation in a way to protect our bodies and to protect our people through a reproductive justice lens. And we also work to promote healthy sexual activity and expression, along with increasing condoms, access to condoms and sexual health education for Dene youth and communities as well. So our goals over at the Res Condom Tour is to promote healthy sexual activity, increase access to condoms for Dene youth and communities, encourage healthy sexual expression and identity, and offer these safer places where people of multiple genders or people who don't identify along the gender binary to come through and have people to talk to and understand their situation and as a way of giving back to our communities. We're also beginning this conversation around sexual expression on Navajo Nation. A lot of the outreach that we do is very in your face, over at flea markets and over at parades back home on Navajo. And by doing that, we believe that we're disrupting the space that the settler colonial society has created. And by disrupting the space, we're opening up these conversations that can happen around something that is very uncomfortable for a lot of Native people to talk about, and that's sexual activity, that's sexual expression, that's gender identity. And so being able to understand and have these conversations and bring it into view, we can begin to work toward a liberation of our bodies and a liberation of our Indigenous peoples. And let's see, the Red Condom Tour also utilizes Dene philosophies as our underlying foundation, which include Nsahakes, thinking, Nahatat, in planning, Inna, living, Sihasen, reflect, and Sa'anagay Pekahaja, and through our hashtag Sex is Ceremony. As youth, as a youth-initiated movement, we really value protecting the sacred, encouraging control of our bodies and autonomy of our own bodies, sexuality, livelihood, and the love for our people and the love that we have for our land. In this way, our movement encourages Indigenous resistance against settler colonialism, reclamation of our Indigenous bodies, resiliency through our public outreach, and resurgence of the youth presence and voice. We are placing control back into the hands of our people, back into the hands of our communities, our families, and Dene individuals by providing these materials and a safer place to converse about protective measures to ensure continuance and safety, while also placing a high emphasis on the recognition and the celebration of our Dene, queer, and sexual bodies. And so all of this is created using a decolonial methodology to help initiate youth social movement through our central hashtag, which is Sex is Ceremony. And Matthew and I really worked on making our efforts as reflective as we can of current Indigenous social movements surrounding smashing patriarchy, smashing the settler colonial state, and adding to Indigenous resistance movement using strength-based methodologies to do so by talking about how much we love our land, how much we love our people. And it's often said that what happens to our bodies happens to the lands. What's happening to our lands happens to our bodies. So we need to bring these conversations around environmental resource extraction within our communities as well to the table in order to really get the full reproductive justice lens of what's going on back on Navajo right now. And continuing on with the presentation, our first stop for our 2014 Window Rock outreach was actually in Window Rock, and these are some photos of our outreach there in the flea market. And we do outreach in the flea market because this is a social hub that a lot of people come to either to buy or sell or just look at various items that vendors may have. And so we find it easier to be able to pass out condoms here where the people already are. This is another effort we did in Chinle, Arizona back in 2014, and it's outside of the chapter house. And we also had NNHAAD come and do free testing, and we also had students from Dene College out in Saley to do presentations on food sovereignty as well. In Tuba City, I didn't go to this one, Faith went to this one, but from what I heard, this one happened over 4th of July weekend, so they made glitter condoms, and that was pretty cute to see. And our last stop was in Shiprock, New Mexico. This outreach was actually, I believe it was in Window Rock, but these photos were too beautiful not to put in, just because it really shows how much we really work to go out into our communities, even to the point where we're walking along the parade route to pass out condoms. Even though people are yelling and screaming at us, sometimes a lot of people will hate on the work that we're doing, but we persevere and we do our best to get as much attention as we can to eradicate STIs and to bring more awareness around conversations around sex and sexuality and sexual education. And these were some of the statistics that we got from our 2004 outreach. We were able to pass out more than 300,000 external condoms, just a little under 200 internal condoms, 102 dental dams, and the most favorable condom that people really enjoyed was the one flavored rib condoms. And I think this was probably because of the way that it's shaped. It's a circle, and a lot of times it has very catchy images on the front of it. And for our fair routes, this is usually a norm. We run out even before we get to the halfway mark of the parade route in Shiprock. And the first year that we did outreach, we passed over 4,000 condoms within 1 mile, along with 25 dental dams, 100 packets of glue, 50 condom education pamphlets and snack bags. And we also do outreach using dating apps such as Grindr, Growler, and Tinder. We receive a lot of very positive encouragement and interactions, and that year we only had 2 haters. If you want a more in-depth account of our 2004 Shiprock Parade outreach, there's actually an Al Jazeera article on it. If you look up my name or the Res Condom Tour / Al Jazeera, it should pop up on Google. And since 2004, we have been working to go out to more communities. And so these are the communities that were presented on Window Rock, Chinle, Tuba City, and Shiprock. But as the years began to roll through, we've been getting more requests to go out to more communities, to do our work, to do outreach. And let's see, yeah, for 2016, we went to the Gallup Arts Crawl, the flea markets in Window Rock, Ganado, Dilcon, and we're also over at the Narbona Pass Classic. And for our parade route, we went to Navajo Nation Fair, Southwestern Navajo Nation Fair, Navajo Nation Fair, Northern Navajo Nation Fair, and Western Navajo Nation Fair. So we've walked many miles. We've walked a lot of places just to make sure that people within our nation have basic access to condom and harm reduction material. So why sexist ceremony? Again, part of our philosophy revolves around our Dene epistemologies and our Dene ways, and as a way to protect the sacred, to really hold our bodies as valuable and our lives as beautiful, and to show that we love our people and that we care about the well-being of our overall nation. In this way, we are resisting the settler colonial project. We are reclaiming our lands, reclaiming our bodies, and reclaiming how we do outreach around HIV and STI prevention. And we also are resurging as a way of coming back to our communities as college students who had to go off of our own lands to get an education. And so bringing that youth resurgence back to Navajo Nation by doing this outreach. And also our hashtag really holds ceremony at the center of our outreach, mainly because it's very strength-based, and a lot of Native people, a lot of Indigenous people, they value ceremony. And it's usually not meant to be abused, and so if we put sex or any type of sexual activity or conversations around sex within that same arena as being equivalent to ceremony, then rates of respect for and harm reduction, I think, also increase, because we are putting it into terms that Indigenous people use and are more likely to take notice of. And we're taking these protective measures because we want to ensure our continuance and safety as a Native nation. Some of the partner organizations that we partner with include the Native Youth Sexual Health Network, who has been phenomenal in helping us network to get more awareness about the Red Condom Tour and to gain access to harm reduction material and how to do basic organizing. And so the Native Youth Sexual Health Network has been phenomenal for the Red Condom Tour to be able to do this. And some of the things that they do up in Canada and in the U.S. And also in Australia and New Zealand, I believe, they do this thing called My Favorite Condom Flavor Is, and they'll decolonize the way that condoms are talked about by putting it into a taste of flavor that is essential food in other Native nations. So we have fry bread, we have cloudberry, we have caribou jerky, moose stew, salmon, maple syrup as different condom flavors that they're representing here. And you can look more at their website at nativeyouthsexualhealthnetwork.com. And we also do workshops with the Res Condom Tour whenever we can and whenever we're available or if people ask. This photo was actually taken this past Res Condom Tour outreach, and these are some of the organizers and volunteers out in the Window Rock and Navajo Nation area, and they are all phenomenal people. They're such beautiful people. Our volunteers are amazing, and we would not be where we are today without our volunteers. And that's all I have for our presentation today. Some other questions that you may be able to answer and maybe even engage with us on social media is answering these various questions, or encouraging other participants to answer these various questions using the hashtag #SexistCeremony and posting it either on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. And you can also find us on those social media outlets at Res Condom Tour.
Thank you so much, Kyoshia. Just a reminder for folks, thank you so much who have chatted in their questions. Please continue to chat in your questions throughout the webinar. We've had a question that is asked about slides and recording, and we wanted to let you know that the slides and the recording for this webinar will be posted on whatworksinYouthHIV.org after the presentation.
I forgot to add one more thing. Is it okay if I add one more thing?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, cool. Just for this year, we began a partnership. The Res Condom Tour began a partnership with Trojan, the condom company, and we've received about 500,000 condoms for our fall and summer outreach. So we're doing really good now, 4 years later. I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in the next 4 years. Thank you and have a good day.
Great, thank you so much, Kirsia. So next up, we have Dr. Stephanie Craig-Rushing. Dr. Stephanie Craig-Rushing is a project director for the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board. Her work focuses on designing and evaluating interventions to improve adolescent health, including Healthy Native Youth, an online portal for tribal health educators to access effective sexual health curricula, and We Are Native, a multimedia health resource that empowers Native teens to get actively involved in their health and well-being using social media, text messaging, community service grants, and links to medically accurate information. Stephanie completed her Master's of Public Health, concentrating on international health development at Boston University, and her PhD in Public Administration and Policy at the Hatfield School of Government at Portland State University, focusing on community health and social change. Now I will turn it over to Dr. Craig-Rushing for her presentation.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to contribute to this really exciting lineup of programs. I'm already learning a lot from the folks that have presented already. I work at the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board. We collaborate with the 43 federally recognized tribes in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, but also do a lot of work outside this region as well. It must have been 2016, last year, we formed a partnership with folks who were interested in supporting the dissemination of culturally appropriate sexual health programs for Native youth. We realized that, to be effective, health curricula needed to be age appropriate. They have to be culturally relevant and reflect the values and learning styles of the learners being taught, and that finding curricula that meets these requirements for American Indian Alaska youth can be really challenging. And so we worked collaboratively to create a website that would help educators and teachers do just that. The Healthy Native Youth website is a one-stop shop for educators, teachers, and parents. From the curricula tab at the top there in purple, you can look at the programs that have been added to the website and learn more about each program, including the intended age group and where the programs are designed to be implemented, whether they're in a classroom or a community setting. The lesson plans, handouts, and supplemental materials are also listed in there, and many include recorded videos and webinars to help prepare educators to facilitate each program. And finally, we provide information about how the program was designed or adapted and evaluated with American Indian Alaska Native youth. This is one of the ways that you can filter the materials by age or LGBT inclusivity, program setting, and evidence of effectiveness, which is a nice feature. And then once you select a program, you have everything that you need in order to implement the program in a community setting. You have training materials, lesson plans, any supporting materials like marketing materials, and references and links to the program, and you can download all of it as a zip file so you don't have to click through each tab. And we have been really involved in this particular intervention. Native Voices is a video-based intervention that was designed with collaboration for 15 to 24-year-olds here in the Pacific Northwest, but then evaluated nationally, and it is now the only evidence-based intervention recognized for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for preventing HIV and other STDs among American Indian Alaska Native youth. So that program is housed on the portal, and we have a facilitator's guide that allows you either to show the video alone in a single setting, or facilitate a conversation after showing the video, or break the video up into 5 different segments and then do activities if you have the ability to break up the lesson over 5 days, like in a health class like that. So we encourage folks to check out that video. And also on the website, there are resources for health educators in terms of facilitating sensitive conversations or answering sensitive questions. We know that can be a challenge in the classroom setting. There's also a feedback tool embedded in the website, and we're really encouraging folks who have used any of the programs on the website to give us feedback on their use. We want to see how these programs are used in community settings and what youth, the youth response to the program. So if you have used any of the programs on the portal, please check out this feedback option and send us some information about how you used the program. And most excitingly, I think for us, we are still looking for new programs to add to the website. So right now, it's very focused on sexual health topics, but we have the ability to really make this a very holistic health education resource for educators, and we're really encouraging folks that know about any culturally relevant health promotion programs around these other topics like drug or alcohol prevention or tobacco prevention, violence prevention, to upload them to the website as well so that health educators can access them. And we're happy to help support folks uploading materials if you have any questions about how to do that. So that's kind of one element of the work that we do at the Northwest Portland Area Indian Health Board. And then a second element is to kind of reach young people directly through a holistic multimedia health resource that's called We Are Native. And we, as a team, are always kind of tracking what young people are doing in the world of technology. And so last year we surveyed over 650 teens and young adults around Indian country on their media technology use and health information seeking, what kind of information they're looking for online using various technologies, and where they go to get health information. So not surprisingly, a good proportion of teens out there in our communities are turning to social media or the internet to have their health questions answered. They're also turning to their parents and to friends and siblings. And so as we design these programs, we're always looking for ways to both meet young people's needs for health information where they're ready and most comfortable accessing it, but also to encourage communication with those folks that they feel most comfortable talking to. So, how can we use these curricula or tools to support young people talking to their parents or their peers, and vice versa? How do we support parents and peers talking to young people around these topics? So one of the communication channels we use through the We Are Native platform is a website that launched in 2012, and it has over 300,000 page views on a wide variety of topics, and includes information on physical health and mental health and spiritual health and the environment and kind of health activism topics. And about 40% of our traffic is related to sexual health topics. So not surprisingly, that's kind of the topic that young people are most drawn to on the website. We also have a section of the website dedicated to Ask Auntie, and she answers questions about a whole range of different topics, from violence to physical health to grief, and we're actually launching a new, very interactive version of that this week. So if you're on Facebook or on our actual website, we'll be doing some promotions of that new section of the website we're excited about. And folks can also search through all of the questions and answers that have already been submitted, and her responses are provided both in a video and in a text response that we help kind of promote through our other social media channels. We have been promoting the Native Voices video on our social media channel, and in February, that video had over 2 million views on Facebook cumulatively since its launch, which is kind of exciting. So it does promote conversation and sharing, and we can see that in the wide world network of social media, and we encourage folks to share it through your social media platforms as well. We also have a text messaging service. We send out weekly tips to participants around health topics and kind of linking folks back to the sexual health information available on the website, and contests and other activities that we do to kind of promote interaction with our web materials. And then just last month, we launched kind of a section of that text messaging service around sex ed tips. So if you text the word sex to 9779, you will get a series of sexual health messages, about 2 per week for several weeks. And we tested that series of sexual health messages last summer through our text messaging service. And folks who participated in that series of messages showed statistically significant improvements in condom use and STI testing, which is really exciting and really shows the power of text messaging as a way to reach young people in very diverse geographies, and also the power of promoting healthy engagement with their own health behaviors. So that's a tool that we're continuing to expand upon and promote in communities. So let us know if you have any interest in kind of promoting that service in your community, and we can help work with you to get young people engaged in this text messaging service. Here are some of our other channels that you can find us on. And if you are a young person yourself, we also have youth ambassadors, and that application will open soon in April, so stay tuned for that. And we also offer community service mini grants for young folks who would like to make a difference in their community and do kind of a community service project for up to $475. And this is our team at the board and our contact information, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Craig Rushing. Again, a reminder, we will be sending out, you can access the slides in the webinar on whatworksinYouthHIV.org, the website, and you will be able to click on those links in the slides and sign up for or follow or like the social media channels for each of the organizations. So thank you, Dr. Craig Rushing, again for your presentation. Finally, our last presenter is Cornelia Connie Jessen. Ms. Jessen is a Senior Program Manager for the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. Ms. Jessen manages the HIV/STD prevention program with a focus on adolescent sexual health and STD/HIV prevention. Ms. Jessen has also been involved in community-based participatory research projects to develop, adapt, and evaluate sexual health interventions for American Indian and Alaska Native youth. Connie completed her master's in anthropology with a focus on medical anthropology and public health at the University of Alaska Anchorage. We will now turn it over to Ms. Jessen for her presentation.
Thank you, Hanaba, for the introductions, and thank you to Hanaba and Alyssa for inviting me to speak today at the webinar. They have asked me to talk about our experience in developing a sexual health video program that's culturally appropriate for American Indian Alaska Native youth. And so I think I should have given you a map of Alaska, but you all probably know that we are the largest state in the nation, and that the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium is a consortium located in Anchorage, Alaska, and we represent about 12 different regions throughout the state, representing over 250 Alaska Native communities. And so our focus is not just Anchorage, but it is statewide. And just to give a little bit of a background, Alaskan youth in general, but Alaska Native youth really experience very high rates of sexually transmitted diseases, and specifically rural youth living outside of the urban areas where sometimes you can only get to the community through airplane in the summertime or boat in the summertime, and then in the wintertime, you know, it's a snow machine. And so the access to services is limited. And as we all know, STDs increase the risk of acquiring HIV, and if STDs are not treated, then they cause long-term negative health outcomes. That, in addition to the lack of access to evidence-based sexual health programs that are culturally and age-appropriate, was something that our program has been wanting to address for a long time. And so in 2010, we received funding from the Indian Health Service through the Native American Research Centers for Health to address this disparity. And so just to give you an overview of what it is that we were trying to do is we really wanted to create a culturally and age-appropriate healthy relationship and sexual health program for Alaska Native youth who are in the high school age group and live in rural Alaska. And the way we planned on going about this was we wanted to understand what sexual norms and risks as well as protective factors are, and then we wanted to use that understanding to develop a program that is relevant and meaningful for Alaska Native youth in rural communities. The program, we knew, because of some of the limitations in rural Alaska on services available and teachers who are actually health teachers, we wanted to make the program easily implementable and also short, and it can be fitted into a school lesson, a health lesson, or that it could also be done outside the school in a community setting. And then we also wanted to determine if the program actually changes self-reported knowledge, attitudes, perception, and behaviors. So this is an overview of our process, how we went about it, and I will be going into each of these items individually, but we started out by gathering youth perspectives, which we then used to develop a idea about Safe in the Village and went on to produce it. We went and started a part of the dissemination where we went back to some of our original communities who participated to do red carpet showings and get feedback of the video intervention, and then we also started the evaluation process, and then since about December 2015, it has been available. And throughout the whole process, we really tried to be very community involved. That's I would like to start out with that component, is the importance of community involvement in developing these programs that are culturally relevant. And so we from the get-go, we worked with the tribal entities to obtain research approval and community support. We set out to find local champions and community stakeholders and key informants that could help with the development. When we went out and did our interviews for gathering youth perspectives, we employed local site coordinators to help us with that effort. And then we also involved the community advisory committee that we asked to provide guidance and input throughout the process. And the committee had representatives from tribal leadership, site coordinators that were involved in our interviews, parents, including young parents, meaning, teen parents, other youth representatives, healthcare providers, and for our community, that's mainly community health aides who are lay individuals, but they receive training through the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, and they work in the community clinics in their respective communities. And then we also had other community stakeholders or members who were interested in bringing such a service to their communities. So the first step was to gather Alaska Native youth perspectives, and for that we had to apply to the Alaska area in IRB for approval, and also in addition to that we have to go and get approval for all of the tribes that are involved. And once that was a process that took probably about over a year, if not a year and a half. Once we'd had that in place, we set out to conduct in-depth interviews, and the idea was that we would interview youth 15 to 24 years of age to identify key prevention messages for the program, but also to come up with the evaluation framework, some of the outcomes that we wanted to look at. And we also employed what's called culturist consensus, and that was to identify some of the cultural norms among youth and to see how much they actually agree on the key messages that we were identifying in the in-depth interviews. And that was a process that led to identify 4 main key prevention messages. And overall, we interviewed about 97 youth in 5 different communities located in southwestern and northern Alaska. And the reason we focused on those 2 regions was that the STI rates in those regions are really the highest in our state. So we wanted to really target those areas. So the key prevention messages we knew had to revolve around sex and STIs, particularly, conveying the message that respecting others' decisions to delay sexual activity is very important. Interpersonal violence, experience of interpersonal violence was very common among the youth that we interviewed, and so one of the messages that came out of that is that the importance of standing up and speaking up against acts of harassment. The other piece was that not everyone had a trusted adult that they felt comfortable talking to, so one of the things that we wanted to convey is that it is important that you find somebody they can talk to within their family or community. And another piece that was very key is alcohol abuse, because it is something that is so common that it's often seen as a norm. And so just conveying the message that it is okay to say no and to drinking and using drugs, and you'll still be able to have friends. That was one of the messages that came out of the last messages that a message came out of the interviews that we conducted. So once we had this information, we gathered it in a way that it was sort of like a guidance for a local company, movie production company, to develop a script based on those key messages that we identified. Once we worked with them very intensely on a story for what turned out to be the Safe in the Village movie, and it was a lot of back and forth it was a very interesting experience because, we are from public health and we're in tribal health, and to communicate to a movie production company that, these are the messages that we want, and not not making it too Hollywood. I think there was a lot of back and forth going on, and we each each of us learned a lot about what the other wanted to do, and we came sort of together and had a script that we then vetted through our advisory committee. And so questions were about, are locations and scenarios reflective of rural communities? Are the words and languages used authentic? What about the characters? Are the situations and events realistic? Are the key messages clear and culturally appropriate? What do we need to change? And do we have this the working title of Safe in the Village, and we wanted to see if there's another title that we should be using, but everybody really loved Safe in the Village, so that's what we went with. And then once the advisory committee approved the final script, we began filming in Anchorage, which is our urban area. It's a city of, almost 300,000 people. And then Kotzebue is a large community in northwestern Alaska of about 5,000 people. And then after the filming took about 3 months, and then we entered a phase of post-production editing where we again had to work really closely with Mirror Studios to make sure that we had the product that we were looking for. And so here are just a few shots from the filming. We had Alaska Native youth actors and elders, and wanted to make it really look like something that youth experience in rural communities. And it was we shot the film in the dead of the winter, so it's all white. There's snow everywhere, cold temperatures. So this is what people live through for 6 months of the year. So it's, I think, pretty relevant. And then ultimately the outcome is Safe in the Village sexual health video program, and it's really intended to start conversations about STIs and healthy relationships. It could take anywhere between 3 or 4 hours, as it consists of 2 parts. The first part is a 34-minute movie that can be shown alone or also with supplemental actor interviews that are about 25 minutes long. And each of the parts can be followed with a group discussion, and for that we developed a facilitator guide that we were intending to make really useful for lay people and people who are not necessarily educators or in the health field. We also developed posters for the workshop and clinic advertisements, and we have a movie soundtrack that is actually available on iTunes. The Safe in the Village soundtrack can be downloaded. And it turned out really, really fun and hopefully something that appeals to young people. So the next step that began between 2014 and 15 was the evaluation piece. We went to 5 different new communities in the same regions and enrolled 105 youth ages 15 to 19 years old. And in each of the communities, we implemented facilitator-led Safe in the Village workshops, and either within a school or in a community setting. And the participants filled out a survey right before the workshop and then immediately after the workshop. And then we also did an online follow-up survey about 6 months after their original participation. So we're just wrapping up data analysis, so I'm hoping to be able to present that at the National Indian Health Board Tribal Public Health Conference here in Anchorage in June. So that will be something I think that we will look forward to doing, because it's taken a long time to get to that point. And I hope some of you might be attending the Public Health Conference here. In terms of dissemination, as I mentioned earlier, we held movie premieres not only in our main 5 original communities, but also here in Anchorage. We have, if you want to look at the movie, you can go to our website, iknowmine.org. It's sort of what, similar to what Stephanie was describing of their We Are Native website. And we also ended up doing a huge social media campaign to release the movie with as many episodes. That was actually, I think, last April for STD Awareness Month, and we'll probably do something similar next month. And I already mentioned that the soundtrack was released on iTunes and actually also CD Baby and Amazon. And we did already create an online SITV facilitator training module, and all of it is actually available through the Healthy Native Youth portal that Stephanie presented on just a little bit ago. And I think this is just such an awesome outcome of years of work towards it. And I know that Stephanie coined the term magic portal when we first started talking about it, and I think it's just wonderful to see that it's finally come to fruition, and it has so many great evidence-based programs available specifically for American Indian and Alaska Native youth, and hopefully we will expand the programs that are available in the near future. And these are just some screenshots of the DVDs, what it looks like, the posters, the advertisements, and here is the contact information. My name, my phone number, our website. If you have any questions after the webinar, I'd be happy to talk with you individually. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Connie. And thank you again to all of our great presenters. We've heard information from locations throughout the country with models and efforts taking place to reach Native youth through HIV prevention and wellness, including an initiative that was youth-led and others that were youth-informed. We do want to give you a little bit more time to please chat in your questions for our presenters. While you're doing that, I do want to let you know about something new that's going on with what works in youthhiv.org. So in March, at the end of March, March 28th, at 3 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Mountain Time, we will have a webinar for Circle of Harmony where attendees will learn how to use social media to get more out of events and conferences. Scheduled around National Native HIV/AIDS Awareness Day and the annual Circle of Harmony Conference, participants will hear about ways to use digital tools and strategies to communicate before, during, and after HIV-related events and conferences that they are attending or organizing. Presenters will include social media experts from AIDS.gov. Alyssa will also chat out the information to register for that webinar. So now we will answer some questions that have come into the chat box. We had a question about what is the theme for 2017 for National Native HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. And that theme this year is Unity in Community, Standing Strong for HIV Prevention. Also, we had some questions again about the presentation. The presentation and the webinar will be posted on whatworksinYouthHIV.org. We had a question about what RES means, and RES is a shorthand abbreviation for reservations. And Kyoshia, we had a question that came in for you. The question is, what have other Native youth communities, or have other Native youth communities approached you for pointers or advice on duplicating your efforts in their tribes or communities?
Hi, this is Josha. Yeah, so far we have had some people out in Tulalip territory, out in Anadarko, Oklahoma, as well as some of the pueblos surrounding the Albuquerque area. And other Native nations show interest in duplicating the Res Condom Tour in their own Native nation. So I have gone out to Tulalip to work with their youth in creating a youth-led condom tour as well. And I've gotten approached by some Native nations out in Oklahoma to do the same as well. And so it's a work in progress. And what the Res Condom Tour is based on is our Dene philosophies. And so making sure that if we do go into a Native nation, that they're using their own philosophies to create their decolonial methodology within their own Native nation, and making sure that it's coming from their youth, from their community, and it's being informed by their cultural teachings, by their cultural knowledge systems, first and foremost, just to make sure that it's specific for their Native nation. And so we're exploring that right now, and we're working with other Native nations slowly, but building those collaborations. And it's good work. It's adding to Indigenous liberation. Thank you to whoever asked that question.
Thank you so much, Kiosha. Stephanie, we had a question for you. In addition to LGBTQ focus and in inclusivity, are you including Two-Spirit as an Indigenous organizing framework? And also in answering that question, will you give a quick definition of Two-Spirit?
Ooh, that puts me on the spot, huh? I kind of yes or no to the first part of the question. So the Healthy Native Youth website allows folks, as they're uploading their curricula, to identify whether the program is inclusive of American Indian or inclusive of LGBT and Two-Spirit youth. And we don't really define that for them. So folks kind of have to make a self-assessment as to whether the curriculum speaks to the health needs and, you know, decision-making processes of all youth, or if it's more focused kind of on heterosexual health. But I can speak for the Native Voices intervention specifically in that it is inclusive of LGBT and Two-Spirit characters. There's a pretty significant storyline in the video involving those characters, and so we are encouraging folks who are designing programs and adding them to the portal to make sure that they are inclusive of all of our community members, and you know, including LGBT and Two-Spirit young people in their design and development process, and of course inclusive in the class lessons as well, you know, in an age-appropriate way. And then a definition of Two-Spirit, it's a term that has, you know, not been used by all communities, but a good portion of folks out there identify as kind of having both the male and female spirit, and it's an identity that some people use in relation to kind of an LGBT sexual identity. I'm not an expert in that, so I'm sure someone else can chime in from the presentation in a more cohesive way.
Thank you, Stephanie. Is Kiosha or Connie, do you want to add to that definition?
This is Connie. Well, I think that, you know, that Stephanie defined as a general definition. We're actually just trying to figure out if this is something that people here in Alaska use, Alaska Native people, because Two-Spirit is reflective of a lot of more of the American Indian cultures in the lower 48, and so we're about to kick off an Alaska Native LGBTQ survey next month to kind of find out more about that. But I think people up here use it sometimes, but I'm just not sure if it accurately reflects the culture and their view of LGBT individuals. But we also have a very, very diverse group of people up here, so it probably is, it would be hard to find a concept that applies to all of our cultural groups.
Thank you, Connie. I would echo that too. that the diversity of terms that is used to describe LGBT, Natives, and Two-Spirits. It's very diverse, including words that are used only in each one of the Native languages. And so it is pretty diverse whether folks do embrace Two-Spirit or the concept of Two-Spirit, what was traditional in their communities and what that name was in their languages. So it's very diverse. And then even Natives who are LGBTQ and identify as LGBTQ and not necessarily as Two-Spirit. So it's very diverse. Another question that we have is what places Native youth particularly at risk for HIV? And I thought we could hear from Connie on this question.
I'm sorry, which one was that?
What places Native youth particularly at risk for HIV?
Oh, just in general terms, I think that Pamela did a very good job at the beginning, sort of describing some of the health outcomes that we see, like teen pregnancy and high STI rates, high alcohol and drug abuse, and as well as other issues, you know, are indicative of certain risk behaviors, and all of the risk, not all of them are necessarily just for HIV, but place them at risk for other behaviors that are risk behaviors for sexually transmitted infections in general. And so I think that you know, there is a diverse group of health disparities that are impacted by some of the health behaviors that indicate sexual risk behaviors. I don't know if that answers the question, but if there's a more specific question about HIV transmission, I'd be happy to answer that too.
Great, thank you, Connie. Stephanie or Kyoshia, would you like to add on to that?
You know, I think another thing that, you know, can fuel transmission is going between urban and rural communities, and, you know, particularly if someone could acquire it in a more urban community and then bring it into small communities with more tight sexual networks, you know, we can see patterns of transmission because of that.
Hey, if I can chime in as well. I could say that the transmission of like STIs and HIV/AIDS is really fueled within our communities, like on the grassroots level. This is what I see. By not having the space or the opportunity or being the level of comfort needed to talk about sex and sexuality in a safe space, in a space that's non-judgmental, in a space that's open to the idea of using these terms such as Two-Spirit, or for Navajo Nation, for our race, we have 8 different genders, and so making sure that people feel safe with whatever gender pronouns. Sometimes those are very difficult spaces to create and maintain and sustain back home. So I think that a lot of that really, really works to oppress our voices as Indigenous youth and make us uncomfortable. But that's what we're trying to break, that cycle of violence, that stigma around sex, sexuality, and talking about STIs and talking about our bodies in relation to land. And so we're currently working on that.
Great, thank you so much. We'll give another minute to see if there are any other questions that folks have.
I think, Hannah, there's another question about adherence to medication.
So the question is, are there measures being taken in order for those who are infected to be adherent to their medication regimens? From our panelists, who would like to answer that?
This is Connie. I actually want to mention something that our Ryan White-funded early intervention services is currently doing for adherence to medication, is actually using a text messaging service that is a tool for reminding patients to take their medications and be able to text back if they're having any issues. And it's only been, I think they've only done it for a couple of months, but it's shown really, really good promise, and they've seen, one of the measures is the viral load suppression in their patients, and that seems to have gone down quite a bit. So that's more of a newer strategy, I think, in attempting to address compliance with medications for HIV-positive individuals.
And then here in the Pacific Northwest, we were involved in kind of a small pilot project to kind of assess user satisfaction with a phone-based app around HIV medication adherence and side effects. And participants were given a phone with this app where they were able to kind of track their own physical response to medications. It also gave them reminders, and the information was automatically shared with their clinic-based caseworkers, so that this information was kind of open to improve adherence to clinical services as well. So it was a pretty small pilot, but folks were really happy with the service, and I think they integrated it into some of their service delivery with folks who are HIV positive after the pilot. And I can connect anyone interested into something like that to the folks who are involved. This is Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So those are all the questions that we have. Again, we want to say thank you so much to our panelists for sharing so much great information, resources, as well as to everyone who joined us for this webinar. We'd like to ask if you would please complete the evaluation that we will put in the chat box. And another reminder, a recording of this call and the speaker slide will be available within a week on whatworksinyouthhiv.org. And I want to say to everyone, as National Native HIV/AIDS Awareness Day nears, I send blessings for any events you are putting on and wellness to your communities. Thank you, NNHAAD, all of you, for your participation in this call. This concludes our training, and this call will now be ended. Hagone, goodbye.